Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Attitude Magazine's ADHD Experts broadcast. We are pleased to have Ann Dolin here talking about how to make up for lost ground after a year of hybrid and remote learning. Before we get started, let me note a couple of housekeeping items. Those of you tuned in to the live webinar may download the slides now by clicking on the Event Resources section of your webinar screen. And if you're interested in the Certificate of Attendance option, look for instructions in the email you'll receive around an hour after the live broadcast. For those of you listening in replay or podcast mode, you can visit attitudemag.com and search podcast 357 to access the slides, the webinar replay, and the Certificate of Attendance option. And if you support the work we're doing here at Attitude to strengthen the ADHD community, we encourage you to visit attitudemag.com/subscribe and sign up for Attitude Magazine for your family or to share with a teacher or a loved one who could benefit from greater understanding of ADHD. And the sponsor of today's Attitude webinar is Play Attention. For over 25 years, Play Attention has been helping children and adults thrive and succeed. Their program utilizes NASA-inspired technology and is founded on the latest research in neuroplasticity. Each program includes a lifetime membership and a personal executive function coach to customize your plan along the way. The plan is evidence-based and supported by research, and home and professional programs are available. Call 800-788-6786 or click on the hyperlink on your screen for free ebooks on executive function, parenting, emotion regulation, impulse control, and more. Or you can go to their website, www.playattention.com. Attitude thanks our sponsors for supporting our webinars. Sponsorship has no influence on speaker selection or webinar content. Now for today's topic. Many students with ADHD have struggled with virtual learning fatigue and received little individualized instruction over the last year. They're entering summer break already feeling confused and behind. As a parent, you may be worried about helping your child regain lost academic ground. At the same time, you may feel pressure to orchestrate a fun summer for your family. After all, having kids dealt with enough stress and at-home learning already. You shouldn't have to choose between enjoying a relaxing summer and making sure that your child is caught up and well prepared for next school year. Learn how you can achieve the summer balance your family needs, especially after a year unlike any other. Ann Dolin has more than 25 years of teaching and tutoring experience. A former Fairfax County public school teacher, she founded Educational Connections, a tutoring and test prep company that has grown to employ 200 tutors and work with more than 10,000 students in the Washington, D.C. area. Her first book, Homework Made Simple, won the Publishers Association 2011 Parent Book of the Year Award. Her new book, Getting Past Procrastination, How to Get Your Kids Organized, Focused, and Motivated, without being a bad guy, is a go-to guide for parents that cuts to the root of the issue. Procrastination isn't a character flaw. It's a behavior that parents and their children can address and improve. You can ask questions of Ann during her presentation, and we will try to get to as many of them as we can, after she is done. So with all that being said, I'll turn it over to Ann. Thanks so much for being here today.
Wayne, thank you so much for having me. You know, as parents of ADHD kids, you may find yourself kind of caught between a rock and a hard place this summer. Kind of what Wayne mentioned. You know, on one hand, you want your child to have a time to re-energize, to relax, just to kind of decompress after a long, arduous year. But on the other hand, you know that if your child sits around watching TikTok videos, playing video games, you could face a summer of stagnation or even going backwards. And you're worried that in order to get your kids to do a little reading, writing, and math, you may have to take the role of the heavy-handed homework police. You'll have to nag, poke, prod, cajole, do whatever it takes to get your kids learning over the summer. So neither option is great. So what is a parent to do? Well, what I can share with you is after 23 years of owning educational connections and working with kids, all different grade levels over actually 23 summers, that the way in which parents and educators can prepare kids over the summer can have a profound difference for the way they go back in the fall, re-energized, motivated, and ready to learn. So that's what I'm going to share with you today, ways that we can make a difference this summer. I'm also proposing that we make this a summer of intention, because it's likely you set forth every summer with a list of the things that you want to accomplish or have your kids accomplish. And then before you know it, August rolls around and not much has been done. Well, I want you to create a summer that you'll remember and that your kids will remember, not just sitting around watching TV, but a memorable one of intention. And as we do this, we will raise your child's summer GPA. Now, you may be thinking, grade point average? I don't want anything to do with that this summer. But the truth is, it has nothing to do with grade point average. I'll talk a little bit about what that GPA is in just a second. In fact, it has to do with 3 elements for success this summer. And over the next 30 minutes, I'm going to share what those 3 elements are with you. Now, the first 2 are personal pursuits. These are goals that we set and that our kids set to make this summer one of intention, this memorable summer. And it's goals that they decide, that we all decide we want to do. For our kids, it's not goals that we come up with, but everybody knows that when kids with ADHD create their own activities, they're much more willing to follow through, especially if it's their idea and not a parent's. So the first 2 are going to be personal pursuits, but the last one is going to be related to math, reading, and writing. So I promise I'll get there. All right, so let's start with Go for Goals. I think this activity, which, by the way, is one of my favorite things to do with kids and families, is important because it has been my experience in working with kids, not just in the Washington, D.C. area, but across the country this school year. They are zoomed out. They've had it. And they just had such a difficult time engaging, especially in a large Zoom room of 25 or 30 kids. So our goal this summer should be to help our kids kind of get their love for learning back, to help them to find something that they love doing and to follow through on it. So that's what Go for Goals is. It's setting up goals. The second part of this is called plotting the path, because goals are helpful, but if we don't have a plan behind them, what good are they? That's where the P of GPA comes in. First goals, and now plot the path. And then the A of GPA is activities for action. And this is math, reading, and writing. All right, so let's get started and talk about the activity related to Go for Goals. The first in our GPA. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to gather your whole family together, and you're going to say, today we're going to talk a little bit about the summer. I would probably set aside about 45 minutes for this activity. And once everybody's together, you're going to need a couple of things. First, you're going to need a packet of sticky notes. Then each person's going to need to have a pen. And if you have a dry erase marker, that's even better. And then you'll need a whiteboard. And if you don't have a whiteboard, it's perfectly fine. Just get a big piece of poster board or just have a blank wall on in your house for kids to put up sticky notes. And then you'll need your phone so that you can set the timer. All right, so here's how it's going to work. You're going to get everybody together and you're going to set the timer for 4 minutes. And you're going to say, how do you want to learn and grow this summer? What are the things you want to do? What are the things you want to accomplish? And you can see here on this whiteboard, by the way, this is my friend Michaela. I did this recently with her family and my other friend, Amy. And you can see everybody's name up on the board. And she went first. So I find it's great for parents to go first. And even when you set the timer and you say, write down the things you want to do this summer, if your kids are stuck, you might give a couple of examples just to get going. And then everybody's going to write down their ideas. And one person at a time is going to go up to the board. And underneath their name, they're going to put up their stickies and talk about why they picked those things. And you learn so much about your kids. I've done this with lots of kids over time and of all different ages, from high school to young elementary school kids. And I've learned things about them that I never knew and that their parents never knew. I learned things about my kids that I never knew. So that's the first step, is everybody gets a turn. And then as you go along, your group might look like this. You want to make sure that you keep it positive. Even if your child comes up with some really outlandish goal, don't worry about it. Say something like, oh, that's creative. I never thought of that. I like your enthusiasm around that. So the goal is to keep it positive, to cheer each other on, and to always be a coach and not a critic. And at a time when kids are kind of deflated when it comes to school, all we want to do is to make things fun. Allow them to set goals based on their interests, things that they want to do, and to really promote collaboration and build trust between us and our kids. So this is what your board might look like when you're done with the activity. And what you'll notice is that there are 2 stickies at the top for each name, except for Amy, because each person now has to answer this question. What are your next 2 goals? What are your top 2 goals? And so I'd say for about a minute, kids should really, and you should really think through, all right, I wrote a lot of things down. If I could only do 2 things, what would they be? And then each person goes around again and they put their name, they put their top 2 at the top of their board, and they talk about why they picked those things. So for me, I said I wanted to participate in 2 5Ks. Catherine, she's a 9th grader. She said she wanted to get a summer job and get a 10th grader, get her driver's license. William, he's interesting. He said he wanted to plan a Major League Baseball trip, going to 2 stadiums, which he had never been. He wanted to see the Indians and the Pirates. And he talked about how he was going to get a budget and figure out the mileage, all the costs associated, where they'd have to spend the night, the price for tickets, the cheapest seats, all of this stuff. So he was super excited about planning out that activity. Amy said she wanted to create a new website for her business. Now, Michaela, the first one who went up, she said, she's the mom, she said, usually parents put up things like, oh, I want to read the 3 books that have been sitting next to my nightstand for a year. But she said, I want to yell less at my kids and enjoy them more. And that actually created this really great discussion amongst all of us, especially her kids. All right, so I will tell you, this is great for all ages. This is an 11-year-old who said that he wants to catch a snook, which are apparently very elusive. So he's going to study the time of day, the best time of year, ways to catch a snook, and do a lot of research behind it. And even the 4-year-old participated. She said she wanted to smell more flowers. So we talked about our goals. Let's then figure out how it's going to get done. This is plot the path. So I actually created a worksheet for you, and I'll share with you how to get that in just a second. But you can see it's broken out from the middle of June, which is when most kids get out of school, till the middle of August, when they're usually wrapping up, getting ready to go back to school. And so you've got basically 2 months of time that kids can plot out their goals. Now, let's take Catherine, for example. This is her worksheet. She said she wanted to get her driver's license. So by the week of August 16th, she wanted to get her license and take the picture for her license. And then she kind of backwards planned the things that she wanted to do leading up to it. This might be hard for some kids. So as a parent, you might want to go first and just show an example as how you're thinking about it. You can even make it shorter. You can do something from the middle of June to the middle of July. It doesn't have to be a lengthy amount of time, but the idea is that kids get the practice of planning ahead and breaking something big down into smaller segments. I see this as really firing up their executive function skills. You know, executive function skills have to do with being organized and planning ahead, regulating their behaviors, working memory. All those things are executive function skills. But when it comes to academics, the one I see that is the most important, especially for kids with ADHD, is this idea of planning. planning ahead instead of always doing things at the last minute, which can be very stressful for everybody, we know. So this really gets kids to think ahead. And what I also like is that they practice what they love doing. So the example of the Major League Baseball trip, he's breaking this down into a plan, and he wants to go to these games. So he's super motivated to do this and bring his family along. And it makes it easier come fall. So when kids have a test, they have a project, they have a book report, something that's not due the next day, but might be due in 2 weeks, which we all know is super hard for kids with ADHD. Now they've had some practice in breaking it down into smaller steps. And this can serve them very well in the fall. All right, so if this might be helpful to you and your family, I've actually created a 3-page handout for you. One is the instructions on how to do it, and then the next 2 pages is plot the path. And you can get it by just texting 55444 and then the word summer GPA. So 55444 and the word summer GPA, all one word, and it will come straight to your inbox. So let's talk about reality. You may know that your child with ADHD may not have the ability to always follow through. And that's where you come in. You can plan a weekly family meeting that should also be super positive. And I personally like Sundays best because it's easy to plan for the week ahead. You talk about what you want to discuss, but you can also talk about what's coming up that week. So in this meeting, you're going to have your whiteboard out, if you have it handy, and then your kids plot the path worksheets. And you're going to ask to everybody, how did your week go? And one at a time, each person's going to go around and talk about what they accomplished. Now, inevitably, you will have one of your kids who might do some, but not everything that they wrote down on Plot the Path. And it's okay. But what we can control is not necessarily what our kids do, but how we react to it. It may be our natural inclination to say, why didn't you do this? You said you were going to follow through. I thought this is something you wanted to do. Why didn't you do it? But instead, it's better to ask a powerful question. I love powerful questions because they get kids thinking and solving their own problems instead of us telling them what to do. So you can ask, oh, what got in your way of getting that done? And if your child says, I was watching TikTok videos, you say, oh, tell me about that. And just ask for information and let them tell you what happened. You don't have to give them solutions. You can just let them talk. You may also ask a question about looking ahead at the next week. I personally like this type of question better than saying, what would you have done differently, which is hard for kids and it puts them on the defensive. Instead, you might say, oh, how might you approach this week coming up? You could also say, what's the first step you might take? Or which day do you want to start this? These are all powerful questions. So now we have our 2 tools for intentions, go for goals and plot the path. But the reality is that some kids are still going to need academic practice. Even though they're going to be honing their executive function skills, they still may need some help with reading, writing, and math. And that's where activities for action come in. You know, just like we're intentional about what our kids are going to be doing this summer and having them come up with the ideas, we also want to be intentional about not going overboard and setting up goals for our kids academically that may not be seen to fruition. So what I would recommend is, even though you may think your child needs help in all these areas, just choose 1 or 2. Just pick 1 or 2 that you feel like you can really commit to and that your child will be more likely to be on board with. So let me start with the one that I've seen to be most problematic for kids this past year. In my business, you know, parents call our office every day looking for help for their kids. And what I saw in the last year is that the typical things they called about were not really what they needed at the time. So what they really needed was an executive function coach, somebody who could help keep their kids organized, on track, planning ahead, getting the work done. But also they needed help with math, because math in a Zoom room of 20 kids did not go well for students this past year for the most part. So let's start there. Let's start with math. And the first two resources I want to share with you are online resources. And again, I actually put all this in Summer GPA. You can get all this stuff there, so you don't have to be busily taking down notes. And again, just put in Summer GPA to the number 55444. All right, so here's math. Here are a couple of online opportunities for kids. The first one is called IXL, and you can access this by going to IXL.com. And it's actually software for all kinds of subjects, but I think it's best for math, especially for older elementary, middle, and high school students, because it's adaptive. So you can click on, for example, 7th grade, and your child will work through some problems, and the software will know which ones she's having a hard time with, and then give practice problems in that area to help her shore up those weaknesses. Another one that's really great, especially for young kids in elementary school, is called Arcademics. And it's kind of a combination between an arcade and academics. So it's totally video game format. And it's super engaging for young kids because they just see it as having fun. So if you have a really reluctant math kiddo in elementary school, I can recommend this resource. On the other hand, you might be thinking that you've had enough of online instruction and you don't want your kids online more than they have to be. So at this time, you might want to consider going old school. When my kids were younger, and both of my boys actually have ADHD and they're in college now. But before they went off for the day, before they went to camp or went outside to play with their friends, I would dog ear about a page or maybe a page and a half in a math workbook, and they would sit down for 15 minutes or however long it took them to get through their work and practice their math. And I always made sure that the practice wasn't too hard and that it was more like routine things that they could do independently. So I didn't have to be helping them all the time, because that's not a fun role to have. So for that reason, what I would recommend in math is to find something that's super focused. So if you have an elementary schooler, you could find a workbook just on addition and subtraction or multiplication or division. A slightly older student, just on fractions and decimals. Maybe a algebra student, just on solving equations. In that way, they get lots of practice. So math becomes more fluent for them, without you having to be too involved. One mistake I often see parents with kids with ADHD is they'll pick a workbook like the Summer Bridge Activities book, which is super frustrating for kids for a couple of reasons. One, it has lots of types of curriculum in it, and some of the work kids have not seen before. So although in theory, it sounds great. Oh, the skills you need to go from 5th grade to 6th grade or 8th grade to 9th grade, it can be frustrating for kids and can require a lot of your attention. So for that reason, I would err on the side of caution and go with something a little bit more focused than everything. Now, you might be asking, I'm not sure what my child has to practice. So for that reason, what I would recommend is going straight to the teacher at this time of year and saying, what do you think my child needs to work on in math? Or if you don't get a good response, or if it's really generic, you might say, what's the one thing my child should practice? What if I could pick one thing, or if you could pick one thing that really my child needs to hone in on to get really good at for next year, what would it be? And often that one thing question is much easier for teachers to answer than what are all the things. That requires actually a lot of thinking and work. I personally have found great success using the review preview method with students. And we do this a lot over the summer with kids, in that we'll review that one thing or those things that the student needs to really know, the core information from the past year. And then we'll take the last few weeks of the summer and preview what's coming up. And I found, especially for kids with ADHD, if they can go into the school year kind of knowing what they're getting into and knowing what's going to be instructed, they're more able to pay attention instead of drifting in and out when it's really hard for them. So the preview approach can just be gold for kids, especially in math. All right. So I would also recommend, we'll talk a little bit about reading and writing in just a second, but especially in math, you want to keep it short. Really 15 minutes a day, 5 days a week is all you need. Ideally, the days are consecutive. So it's not like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, which is not a routine for kids with ADHD, but it's even Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Those are consecutive days. It also should be independent work where kids are practicing, but you don't have to be too involved. If you find that you're always involved, the work is too hard, and maybe dial it back a notch and see if that's a little bit better for your child. And set up the plan early in the summer. I often talk to parents that say, I just want to give my child a break this summer, and then I'll think about this the 1st of August. The problem is if your child doesn't know what's coming up the 1st of August, they're just not going to want to do it. They haven't had that expectation. They really are just in summer mode, and it's hard to shift them into anything academic. So what I might recommend is sitting down with your child at the beginning of the summer, or even right before school gets out, and saying, let's talk about the summer. I spoke to your teacher, and she recommended that you work on fractions, decimals, and percents this summer. Here are 2 sources. One is IXL, one is a workbook. What do you choose? You could do it at 8:30. You could do it at 9. What's best for you? We could do it 4 days or 5 days. What would you prefer? I could help you, or I could get somebody else help you. What would be best? And so that way they have a little bit of skin in the game, and you've discussed it early on. Even if they're not going to start till July 1st, at least they know what's coming up and it's really clear. And ideally, if you can put it in writing and put the plan on the refrigerator or somewhere, that's even better. All right, so I want to shift from math to writing. And I want to share with you one of my very favorite things to get reluctant writers, which I will tell you pretty much every kid with ADHD does not like to write, because it takes a tremendous amount of working memory. You have to remember to use proper grammar, capital letters, spell the words correctly. Are there enough descriptive words? Is this what I really want to say? Does it make sense? It requires a lot of working memory. But I will tell you that this fellow named John Spencer, he's a former middle school teacher. He's kind of broken a mold, and he's gotten a lot of really reluctant kids to write. And he has a YouTube page, and you can just Google John Spencer writing. But he also just created a new website, and it's called videowritingprompts.com. And here, everything is video-based. Kids watch a video, and then they have to come up with the ending of the story. And he has a lot of superhero things in here, actually. But I love it because even super reluctant kids are willing to do it. And we help them by providing a template or a graphic organizer so they can put their thoughts together and make the ending. Another thing I can recommend for writing is a dialogue journal. And I first actually experienced dialogue journals as a student. I was in high school, and my English teacher had these composition books for all of us. And every Monday she would pass them out, and we would write about our weekend, and we would, just jot down all of our thoughts, how we're feeling, what we did over the weekend. And then during the week, she would write us back. And then we got our dialogue journal back on Monday. We'd write to her again, and back and forth it went the whole year. And it was just a really awesome experience. And I felt like my teacher really cared about me, and she got to know me. And so when I was a teacher, I taught 4th and 6th grades. I decided that I was going to do this with my students. So every Monday we had the same routine. And as a mom, I want to do this with my kids. And we actually do this a lot with the kids that we see in my practice. We'll leave them with a dialogue journal at the end of the session, or we'll do it online, and they write and they share it with us and we write back. But with kids, you just need the same 99-cent composition book, and you're going to write something to your child. And I wouldn't write something like, how was your day, or what's your favorite sport? Instead, comment on something that they did that was really good. So for example, if you just went to your child's soccer game and your child made this like great pass to somebody else and they scored a goal, you could say, how did you know that Jimmy was open? How did you know to pass into space at that time? And let your child write back. They can draw a picture if they want. They can write in bullets. It doesn't have to be any masterpiece. The key is just to develop that relationship with your child so they can talk to you through writing. And if it's in the evening before they go to bed, hopefully they'll start to associate writing with relaxation. As parents, we definitely don't want to criticize anything, like no misspelled word, no improper use of periods. That stuff doesn't matter. It just has to be super positive, because if kids feel judged, they'll push back, especially our kids with ADHD, and they won't want to do it. All right, so reading. Let's switch gears a little bit. One of the easiest things we can do as parents is to get our kids watching TV with subtitles. And actually, there's this fellow named Robert Vanderplank out of Oxford, and he did the pioneering research a number of years ago on the impact of subtitles on kids reading. And he found that kids improved their comprehension and their vocabulary more than if they didn't have subtitles. So when kids are watching TV, you could say, oh, you could watch TV for an hour or watch it for 2 hours with subtitles. You might find that most subtitles are on streaming subscriptions like YouTube and Netflix. But if you are watching a family movie together, or they're watching shows on YouTube, this is a great way to add in subtitles to their reading development. However, if you want your child to read a more traditional book, I would recommend going through at the very beginning of the summer the reading list that the school sends to you. And they've put all kinds of books on that reading list. And if your child picks the books with the least amount of pages, or this graphic novel they've already read before, don't worry about it. Let them read it. However, if there's not quite a match on that list, or if they want to read something else, one tool that I would recommend is the query on Amazon. And, we often think of the Amazon query as just finding something specific, but you can also put into it like books for reluctant middle schoolers, books for middle school girls who like horses. So you can query all types of things, especially the reluctant reader category. And then lastly, when it comes to reading, it doesn't always have to be in print. If your child is super reluctant, an audiobook is just fine. Ideally, they're listening and following along, but even if they're just listening, that helps them listen to a fluent reader and also develop their vocabulary. So not all is lost if your child will just listen to audiobooks. All right, so when should our kids get this work done? Well, turns out that there are 3 stages of timing in a day. And this is important for all students, but it's especially important for kids with ADHD. Because if we ask them to do something at a time when they're not naturally motivated, it's even worse. So we know through lots of research that the morning time is really the best for people to get work done. They're in their best mood, you have your most energy, and you're also highly vigilant. And vigilance means that you're able to focus the most on something, even if something else is distracting you in the background. So we know that the morning is great until about lunchtime. And that's why across America, you will find that every school gives standardized tests to kids in the morning because their test scores are better than in the afternoon. And from this graphic, you can see why. You can see that there is just a precipitous drop off after lunchtime until people reach this trough at around 3 o'clock. And this is when we as adults reach for coffee, our kids reach for TikTok because they just want to chill and they won't do anything that we ask them at that time of day. Fortunately, everybody kind of goes into recovery mode right around 5 o'clock or right around dinner time. So if you want your child to do work in the summer, what I would recommend is talking to them about the time that they feel is best for them, either in the morning or maybe before dinner time. Around that time of day could be best. But in general, I've found that for most kids, getting it out of the way in the morning is often better. And then if you feel that, you're still worried, this could be, this could create a lot of friction, which may also be ripe for frustration, the relationship that you have with your child. It's fine to outsource it. It could be the high school student down the street or the college student who's home from break. It doesn't have to be expensive. You could also find a professional coach who can work on the executive function skills or maybe do review, preview, and math. Those are the types of things that we do. So there are all kinds of resources in the community that you can utilize to make sure that your child is ready for school in the fall. So finally, as we finish up, I want to leave you with my contact information. I'm going to take questions in just a moment, but I also want to mention that if you have a personal question that either you don't want to ask or that I don't get to, I'm always available by email. And my email is Ann, A-N-N, at ectutoring.com. And I have a ton of resources for parents on my website. It's called ectutoring.com, and there's a section for the blog. And again, if you wanted the resources I talked about, you can text 55444 and then all one word, summer, GPA. So as we finish up, I just want to mention that we don't have to be stuck between a rock and a hard place when it comes to this summer and our kids with ADHD. If we go for goals, plot the path, and then have some activities for action, our kids will experience a summer of success. All right. So Wayne, I would love to turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, that was great, first of all. And we have a lot of interesting questions. One that sort of went viral was they weren't able to access the summer GPA. Are there any spaces? So it's 55444 summer GPA, no spaces, right?
That should be correct. Is that not working?
Well, I don't know. Various people tried various things, and if that's the way to go, we'll.
Okay. Let me give you another one, Wayne. That might be more helpful. Go to 55444 and type in the word PATH, PATH.
Okay. And no space or anything?
No, just PATH.
Okay.
And that will get you plot the path. And what I'll do, first of all, I'm sorry that didn't work. It should be working. What I'll do is anybody that texts PATH, which is basically the activity of the GPA, the summer activity and plotting the path, I'll also just email you directly the resources.
Okay. A couple of people have asked about kids who are already going to summer school. How do you fit this program plan in? That sort of complicates things. Some of their time is taken up already. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
So if you have a child who's already going to summer school, I believe the academic piece is going to be taken care of. And what I would do is make the rest of it just fun. You can definitely do the sticky note activity. You can help them to plot the path, because I can bet they're not going to work too much on executive function skills over the summer in summer school. But ideally, you really just want to make it a summer that is positive for them. And that's I think is the main directive as parents we have, that this summer should be one that kids, really can find that level of learning again after a really difficult year, and just to make it a positive experience as much as we can.
Mm-hmm. Several parents have older students, high school juniors, and they wondered if you had any online resources or paper resources for, practice test sites for the SAT. I know this is a little beyond most of the students you were talking about, but they just wanted to know that's how they want to spend their summer.
Yes, and for good reason, because tests still really do count, even Tests can help your application, even if you're applying to a test optional school. But yes, so there's a couple that are free. So one is Khan Academy. Khan Academy has partnered with the College Board, which produces the SAT. And they have free resources on their site to practice for the SAT. The ACT also, actstudent.org, that also has free practice that you can do. And then if it's helpful, we offer practice tests most Saturdays, and they're online with a live proctor. And for a lot of kids with ADHD, we recommend them taking a baseline to see exactly what they need to practice, because sometimes their scores tend to be lopsided a little bit. Oftentimes it's grammar that catches them up the most, and also some math. So if you take a practice test, then you can see what exactly you need to work on instead of taking a one-size-fits-all approach. And you can find that on our website, ectutoring.com. And then there's a tab for mock tests.
Mm-hmm. That's very good stuff. Several people have asked, and I know you're not a doctor, but have you found in your experience, if a child is on medication, a lot of parents pause it during the summer when they're not in school. Have you found, just anecdotally, I'm not asking you to recommend medication, do you find that, for instance, even this plan that you've put forth here works better if the child is on medication, or?
I think so. I think kids are less frustrated. They're more available to learn. Learning is easier for them. You know, obviously it comes down to a conversation with your doctor and what you decide is best. But I can say, you know, honestly, anytime that we work with kids that haven't been on medication over the summer, it is obvious that, you know, they have a difference in their ability to learn than when they are on medication. Mm-hmm. So it definitely can help. Okay.
Several parents have asked about socialization. Is that part of the plan? I know it wasn't part of this plan, but because kids, you know, what they've suffered through COVID and remote learning, their social skills have gotten rusty, as all of ours have. So any suggestions on that front? Because we all know that, you know, socialization can actually improve performance.
Yes,
you know,
of course.
In academics. So,
yeah, I think the key is there's lots of things obviously you can do. Certainly camps are great for kids. And I know that there are lots of camps specifically for kids with ADHD that can be really life-changing for students. So anytime they can get into a camp is helpful. But also anytime that they can get together with the kids that they're going to see in school that fall, it's going to alleviate some of the stress around going back to school. The kids I've worked with most recently, I had one boy tell me a couple weeks ago, he said, I was asking him about this fall, or I was asking him about friends. And I said, do you ever, you know, text your friends to meet up? And he's like, not really. And he said, I just feel so antisocial now. And I said, tell me about that. And he said, I just feel like I've been at home learning and like I don't even want to go out or see anybody right now. Mm-hmm. And so the more we can get our kids, even if they have to be manufactured dates that we put together, they have to meet up with those kids before they start school, because I do believe it will alleviate some of the anxiety when they ultimately do have to go back to school. Mm-hmm. They've at least had some, they've seen those kids. That's why, you know, if your kid is in a fall sport, that's fabulous, because they often start practices a couple weeks before school starts, and then they go to school and they already know those kids. So even a fall sport like golf or cross country can be really great for kids. Mm-hmm.
In your plan, do you allow time for electronics? One woman says my 12-year-old daughter would want to play Minecraft all day long. So, I mean, how do you resist the lure of video games?
It's tough, but, you know, if you can have sit down with your child and talk about what would be time to play Minecraft and cap it at a certain amount every day. I saw some research recently that it's really like that anything over 3 hours is a lot. So keeping it under that time, and even 3 hours, some parents might say, oh my gosh, 3 hours of Minecraft, that's crazy. But some kids are on Minecraft for 6 hours a day. So I would sit down with your child and craft a plan together. I know you want to play Minecraft. Let's talk about when the best time to play Minecraft is. And also talk about how it ends. Because you have a little bit of leverage there. And you can say, look, if you put this down nicely, if we say you play Minecraft from 3 to 4, and at 4 o'clock, you're unable to put it down, and I have to, get on your case, that means you didn't end nicely. So you don't get it any more time of the day or something like that. But I would put parameters on how it ends and make sure that kids know when the timer goes off or when your time is up. It's really a chance. It's really your opportunity to end well so you can get it again later.
Right. Several parents have asked, as you working through those paper resources and the booklets, should you be correcting your student? I wouldn't. It depends what they put down. So it has to be reasonable. That's why you want to go first as a parent and talk about, like, if you say, I want to read this book, you might break down the chapters, a specific amount of chapters each week. And so if your child goes and they say, I want to, one of my kids did this once. He said, I want to build a computer. And my first thought was like, that's impossible, and I wanted to say, that doesn't seem likely. But he actually did it, believe it or not. And he had money from working, and he had this little plan of when he was going to order the parts, and he didn't do it on time, but he did do it. So I think if we can, guide kids and just ask them questions, and if they put something really big into 1 week, you might say, oh, could you break that down into smaller parts? So instead of saying that's wrong or that won't work, say, could you tackle that a different way? What about spreading that out over 2 weeks? Could that work? That seems to be a better question. Mm-hmm. Once again, multiple questions about how to find a competent tutor who might be an addition to this plan that you came up with, especially a competent tutor who understands executive function difficulties. Where do parents start to look for that, for people like that?
Yeah, sometimes I think the best resource is other parents. So if you know other parents that have a child similar to your child and they've used somebody, that's always a good place to start. You can also talk to the school. You can also Google executive function coaches. We do that all the time. We see kids throughout different areas, mostly online. It feels different when it's one-to-one with students instead of a large group. They haven't had good experiences online, but it's very different one-to-one. So it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody in your neighborhood. It does not. And parents often think it has to be in person. But my experience has been, it doesn't have to be in person. We used to serve kids in home. We'd go for like an hour and a half once a week. And now we do usually 2 30-minute sessions, 2 45-minute sessions, 3 30-minute sessions. And that accountability of seeing kids multiple times per week, especially in the school year, has had a much better impact because too much time passes if the coach only sees the student once a week.
Mm-hmm. Once again, several parents have brought up that when they give their child workbooks, we have students rushing through everything. One says his handwriting looks like a first grader. He's extremely impatient and fights me when I try to correct him. Are there any, having dealt with so many students with ADHD, do you have any tricks or strategies to slow them down as they approach these things?
There's a couple of things you can do, but slowing down, getting kids to slow down is really, really tough. And typically I let it go. If a child, there's different situations. For example, in math, if they have to show their work, they have to show their work. It is what it is. They can't just jump to the answer. So you can say you have to take these 3 steps, whatever they are. For handwriting, I personally wouldn't worry about it. Our kids are going to be online so quickly. and their typing skills will evolve, that it doesn't make sense to create friction in the relationships over bad handwriting. It's so hard for, if a child's handwriting is poor at age 7, it's incredibly difficult to get them to write better after that. So I let that go personally. I don't see that that's such a big deal. I would really focus on completion and not quality. Completion, just doing the work and getting it done. That's it. The other thing you could do is use a timer and say, why don't you work on these things? I'll set the timer for 15 minutes. And even if they're done in 5 minutes and it's, poor quality, you could say, and you can sit here for the rest of the time, find a book that you can read or do something else. And sometimes that trick will help slow kids down when they realize they're going to have to wait for 15 minutes anyways.
Mm-hmm. Another mom is asking, her child goes into a meltdown when he can't figure something out in a workbook. I wondered if you, from your experience, had any strategies to calm him down or to turn him in a positive direction.
It means the workbook is too hard. And even though we don't think it's too hard as parents, and we may have seen that our child did it once or twice before, unless they can consistently do it correctly, it's too hard. So I would back it off. And the goal is for them to be able to increase their fluency in that skill, so that they're getting through it really fast. And then, you can kind of go up to the next level. But if they're asking for help, they're having meltdowns, it's too hard.
Mm-hmm. You had mentioned an algebra resource. One mom is asking any suggestions for resources for shoring up algebra and getting her started with geometry, which she's going to take next year. Any geometry?
Yeah, I think that's a great approach. First, there is a correlation between a good algebra score and a good geometry mark on the report card. And parents think often they're so unrelated. It doesn't matter if you did poorly in algebra. Geometry is a new subject, but I don't agree with that. So I think this mom is on the right path. And what I would recommend is going to IXL. IXL has a whole unit on algebra and also geometry. And I think that's that or Khan Academy, but a Khan Academy requires more work to set it up and it's more student driven, whereas IXL does kind of the whole thing for you. So I would either get a tutor who can work on those skills or go through a program like IXL that's adaptive.
Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, you mentioned something early on that a lot of parents have asked about. What is a snook?
It's a fish.
Oh, okay.
I should have said that.
Oh, okay. What about kids who just don't want to do anything during the summer simply because they are blown out? Even that session that you talked about, the meeting, very first meeting, is there any way to sweeten the pot for that and get kids to participate? Because
sure.
A lot of parents are saying their children simply do not want to do anything right now.
Here's what I would do. I would still have the meeting with your whole family. And what I have been in this situation with kids, they're like, I'm not doing this. This is stupid. and then when they see everybody else doing it and everybody else writing down really fun things that they want to accomplish, they start to get in on the action and they will write down a few things. And if they don't, it's okay. It's all right if they don't do any of these things. It's perfectly fine. It's not the end of the world. This is meant to be fun for kids and things that they, again, want to do, not that we're telling them to do.
Right.
But if you have a child who is this is a perpetual thing, it's chronic, they're not wanting to do any schoolwork, they're not wanting to engage in anything else, and you find that they're shut off from any learning, I might wonder if there's something else going on, and perhaps, there could be a tinge of depression or whatever. And I might consider connecting with a therapist or a counselor who's specializing in kids with ADHD that have kind of like detached and they're disconnected and starting there.
One parent, since we brought up looking for executive function coaches, what is the session like? How I'm curious myself, how do tutors, et cetera, or coaches teach executive functions?
Sure. I can share with you what we do.
Okay.
So in the school year, we, first of all, help the student to understand where all of the assignments are posted. Often teachers post in different places. So we have a map of where everything is posted so they know where to go. It's gotten better and better. So many teachers will all post in the same portal. But then the key is to pull up Google Calendar if that's what they use, and to be able to put down those really important due dates onto the calendar if they don't already auto-populate, and then ask kids, what's the first step in getting this started? Which day might you begin this? What might you do first? What's something easy you can do to begin? And then take that big thing that's due at the end of the week and break it down into smaller increments and calendar it. A to-do list doesn't really work with kids with ADHD. It will just sit there. But if they have it on their calendar, they're much more likely to do it. And then we help them get started on the things that are the hardest for them. Actually, let me go back just a second, Wayne, and say that once they have their calendar set up, we'll talk to them about what might get in the way of getting that done. So, if it's a student who procrastinates, it might be, what are you going to do when you feel like putting them off? What's a strategy you might use to tackle this? And talk to them about some strategies that we share with them that they practice and they can use so they know what to do when they're in that rut. And then after we have a plan set up, we help them to execute on what's difficult. And that's often their issue is they put everything off because a couple things are hard. So we want to make sure that they get the hard stuff out of the way and they can often do the easier things on their own. So it's kind of a combination of an executive function coach and a tutor. A tutor is more short term, let's learn this skill and get this done. Whereas a coach teaches skills that kids can use later on, like in middle school, high school, and in college.
Mm-hmm. And finally, a lot of questions about timers. Do you, in your vast experience teaching children, have you found a timer that actually helps them get going, start work? Anything fun?
I know. I personally love timers. I think they're fabulous. I've used them with college students, kindergartners, everything in between. But I like the time timer personally. And that's the one with the floating red disc that moves so kids can understand elapsed time. I found that kids don't really get elapsed time. So if we say, hurry up, Johnny, you have soccer in 20 minutes, they don't really understand what 20 minutes is. But when they see the red disc moving on the timer, it's easier for them to understand time. You can use timers for other things like showers. You've got a kid that's in the shower for 40 minutes. Keep a timer in the shower and have them set the timer for 10 minutes before they start. It just makes them more aware of time.
Right.
Older kids tend to use the timer on their phone, and that's fine too. But sometimes that can be tricky because then it's easy to jump on a text message or something else that pops up.
Right. So I think the hour is up. Thanks so much for being here and sharing your expertise. Plenty of practical tips and insights and a good plan for the summer. So it was excellent. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you, Wayne.
And thanks to all of the attendees for joining us. And make sure you don't miss future Attitude webinars, ADHD expert articles, or important research updates by signing up to receive our free email newsletters at attitudemag.com/newsletters. Thanks everyone for being here and have a great day.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.